Let's start with another quarterback, Caleb Williams. His dad had some comments the other day, Rick, where he said, listen, the draft is backwards. And he actually makes a lot of sense when you look at it from the perspective of a father concerned about where his son gets a job. Like if you're the number one engineer coming out of engineering school, MIT, you don't go to the worst engineering business in the country. You get whatever job you want. So if you're listening, Debo just put this graphic on YouTube, and here's what Caleb's dad said. He'd almost be better off not being drafted than being drafted first. If there's not a good situation, the truth is he can come back to school. The other thing is, Rick, is, of course, NIL makes that certainly more entertaining. A couple other examples, and I'll talk about those in a second, but John Elway in 1983 and Eli Manning in 2004, there was no NIL. Their families weren't in need of money, so it wasn't a situation where they had to come out, and I don't know what Caleb's situation is. I don't think he has to come out either way. NIL solves that problem, but I don't know what his family's financial situation is. But you tell me, is Caleb Williams' dad right?
Boy, well, if he doesn't come out, let's say he doesn't come out this year, what makes the situation better next year?
I think the only leverage you have as a quarterback in this situation is that you can force the team to trade you even if they do draft you.
Yeah, and then the way things are going in the NFL now, and there's so many new, the way colleges have changed with the NIL, I can't imagine how much money he's making for the new Wendy's commercials that he's doing. I see him every 5 minutes on TV now. So, but he will never, being the first overall pick, I don't know if you'll ever get that kind of money back because it's a significant amount of money. And I would look at it differently, maybe because I'm old school. Okay.
Here we go. Buckle up.
Is he going to play in an all-star game or is he going to play in a bowl?
Right.
I don't know.
Pick him off the board.
I would just say this. If you have an opportunity to go and change a franchise, to take that opportunity, like look at the Eli situation, and that was with Eli and I believe Phillip Rivers, right?
Yep.
So Eli ended up in New York, but with Eli, it was the San Diego Chargers at the time, but then they became the LA Chargers. But would that been a bad situation for him?
Let me turn it around on you. For both the Baltimore Colts, who drafted John Elway in 83 and ended up trading him to Denver, and then Eli, who was drafted by the San Diego Chargers and then traded to the Giants. The losers, for me, in those situations are not the quarterbacks. John Elway went to 5 Super Bowls, won 2. Eli went to 2 Super Bowls and won those. It would be the Giants and the Chargers who are not, the Chargers and the Colts who did not go to Super Bowls in their respective cities. Baltimore became the Ravens. I went to Indianapolis. They eventually went to Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. But the point is, you wonder if they would have been better served trying to get more in return because those football players weren't going to go there. But I don't think the players lost out. It felt like the organizations who originally drafted those players lost out.
Wait, do you think that if Eli would have ended up with the Chargers, that he would have had the same result?
I don't know. And one of the concerns, and Eli talked about this recently, and our guy John Breach wrote about it on CBSSports.com, but one of the concerns, Eli said it was my decision, having talked to his agent, that he didn't want to do it. And one of the speculative concerns was that at the time, the Chargers struggled to develop these quarterbacks. Ryan Leaf didn't work out, and obviously they drafted Ryan over Peyton, or Peyton went number 1, and then Ryan went number 2. And then Drew Brees was drafted in 2001, I believe, second-round pick. He didn't work out. He was sharing time. He wasn't even starting consistently.
Yeah, he was behind Phillip Rivers.
Before Phillip Rivers, it was Doug Flutie. I remember Doug Flutie and he were sharing time, playing time with Marty Schottenheimer as a coach. So I wonder if that played a part in it as well. So to answer your question, I feel like he could have had success in San Diego /LA, but you can't make a player do what he doesn't want to do when they have that sort of leverage.
Yeah, but I don't know what leverage they have, because if you get drafted, they cannot show up and just say, I won't show up. I'll sit out the year and enter the draft the following year.
Right. But then what do you get in return if you're the team? You lose out on the first overall pick.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Again, the reason the league is so good and why every fan of all 32 teams right now has optimism. Well, maybe 30 teams have optimism going into the season. It's because of how everything is structured to try to make the NFL as equal as possible, or the parity across the league.
Yeah. And you are strictly there's no tanking going on. You say that. And then I see what the Cardinals are doing with the quarterback situation. I think Josh Dobbs is reportedly expected to start, who they just traded for a few weeks ago, has a relationship with the offensive coordinator, of course, but there's some things going on there. And the other thing I'll say about the Cardinals is they are not known historically for having great ownership. And if they have the first overall pick and you're Caleb Williams and Caleb Williams' father, you might be hesitant. And just so you know, Debo points out that according to On3, they project that NIL money for Caleb in this year is $2.6 million. So not first overall pick money.
But no, because you're talking, I believe, close to $60 million in fully guaranteed contract for the first overall pick. If I'm, and I don't have it right in front of me, but I know it's a significant amount of money. And even if you get to the second contract and get to the monies they're getting, that's still $60-some million. But let's say it's the Arizona Cardinals and you decide, well, I'm just going to go back. I got NIL money. I got insurance to cover me in case I have a, God forbid, career threatening injury. And then you go into next year's draft or when your eligibility is up. And let's say it's a team not in the same state as Arizona that also is a, I believe, tax-free state or very low income tax state.
Yeah.
And it's out west. It's not too far from LA. I wouldn't call it a major market, but you got to look at all those other things as well.
So let me throw some teams at you. So we talked about Arizona, Washington, and I'm just going through reverse Super Bowl odds as we sit here. So Sportsline put out the Super Bowl odds. If you go from the bottom and scroll up to see who is least likely to win the Super Bowl according to Vegas, Arizona's at the top, no surprise. Washington's actually up there. We'll see how they do. The Titans are another team that could be in the mix for a quarterback, depending on what happens, especially if it's Caleb Williams. So they probably won't draft Drake May if they like Will Levis. We'll see. Tampa Bay is also in that conversation. They have Baker Mayfield in the post-Tom Brady world. And those are teams that maybe Caleb and his dad are like, no, they're too much rebuilding needing to happen, whatever. But then you see teams like the Dolphins. Everyone likes going to South Beach. These players love playing in South Beach. Who knows what's going on with Tua? I'm just throwing out teams out there that could potentially be in the mix. And would you agree with this? It feels like, and when I go over the actual compensation that happened for Elway and even Eli Manning, it certainly feels like teams are willing to certainly give up way more now than they were 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, no, I agree because even these younger GMs or this next generation of GMs in the league, it used to be, okay, you're going to be there. So we got to keep an eye on the now, but also in the future. And now it seems like they are in the same time frame or same window as head coaches. So they're doing everything they can in the win now mode. That's why I think you see a lot more aggressiveness in trades and giving up draft picks, because the front office is about as unstable as the coaching is. And they're in the win now mode just as much as the head coach is in the win now mode.
So ironically, the 49ers gave up all that draft capital to go get Trey Lance. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are in pretty stable situations. It feels like it helps that they win a lot of football games and continually make their way to the postseason. But let me just tell you the draft compensation in 1983, after the Colts drafted John Elway, and John Elway said, I'm not going. According to the news story I read in 83, he told them back around Christmas, I'm not going to play for you. They drafted him anyway. So the Broncos ended up trading the offensive tackle they drafted in the first round of 1983, Chris Hinton, quarterback Mark Herman, and a 1984 first-round pick in exchange for Elway. That's it. Yeah,
that's not happening nowadays.
Absolutely not. And in fact, let's look at what the compensation was for Eli. So Eli was drafted, of course, by the Chargers, and then he was traded to the Giants. In the deal, the Giants got Manning, while the Chargers got Phillip Rivers. They also got a 2004 third-round pick, which turned into kicker Nate Kading, a 2005 fifth-round pick, which was, 2005 first-round pick, which is Sean Lights Out Merriman. That was a good pick. And a 2005 fifth-rounder, which was Notre Dame tight end Jerome Collins. Again, that feels like you're stealing Eli Manning, right?
Right. Well, look at what the draft compensation it was for, like you said, Trey Lance. What did Carolina give up this year to go up and get Bryce Young? If you think Caleb Williams is a generational quarterback, which everybody is saying that he is, I can't imagine the draft compensation for someone moving up trying to get him, especially if the number one overall pick more than likely is going to need a franchise quarterback anyway.
Exactly. So Miami was the team that I mentioned. Two other teams that just sort of popped out that don't necessarily. The Rams could be in a situation where I don't know, they actually have some draft capital finally, but that could be an enticing situation for Caleb Williams, perhaps, just me speculating. The 49ers as well. We'll see what happens with Brock Purdy. Dallas Cowboys. Should I mention that?
I got Trey Lance for a fourth rounder.
They got Trey Lance. They would have to trade that cumbersome contract of Dak, but they, Jerry Jones said the other day that they love Dak. Let me read. So I'm going to read this one part from the 83 article about the impasse that the Elways had with the Baltimore Colts at the time. So Jack Elway was the coach of San Jose State. He's John's dad. And he told the New York Times that he was extremely disappointed that the San Diego Chargers, a team that would later have to trade Eli Manning, didn't make a move for his son. And John had made it clear he wanted to stay on the West Coast. They were widely considered to be the front runner in the bidding for Baltimore's first pick. The Chargers had accumulated 3 first-round picks in that draft, Rick. Number 5, number 20, and number 22, and they had spoken to the Colts many times prior to the draft. But the Chargers had said they did not want to give up that number 5 pick to be a part of the deal. So they wouldn't get off the number 5 pick, and they missed out on John Elway.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say Cardinals, but another team that next year. And you know that if you're the Arizona Cardinals, you can get a boatload, which they did already. Imagine what the draft capital they got for Will Anderson from Houston, right? So now let's say they move down, but you're still in striking distance for Drake May.
Yeah. And
then you get a boatload of picks to go along with Drake May. That may be enticing as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Thankfully, there's a number 2 quarterback in this class. And we talked about that a little bit last year with Bryce and CJ. Are you comfortable coming off Bryce and moving down for CJ or whatever the case may be? And that's something to consider. And also worth noting, there were 6 quarterbacks drafted in that 1983 class, one of the best ever. John Elway, Ken O'Brien. We'll do a quick game. Ken O'Brien, where did he go to school?
You're getting deep into my repertoire.
California Davis, D2, or maybe FCS. Tony Eason went to the Patriots. He went to Illinois. Some guy named Jim Kelly out of the U, Western PA guy, went to Buffalo, Hall of Famer. And Dan Marino, who the Steelers passed on and regretted it, also Hall of Famer, went to Pitt, another Western PA guy, played for the Dolphins, talking about the Dolphins. And then finally, Todd Blackledge was the last quarterback taken. Can
I give you a little Todd Blackledge grew up in a town right next to mine.
Oh.
Penn State, right?
Yeah.
I was recruited by Pitt when Dan Marino was a quarterback at Pitt. And who was the third one you mentioned?
I mentioned Eason. I mentioned Jim Kelly.
Eason, yeah. Back then, I played against him when Southern Illinois almost beat Illinois.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah.
So, but wait a second, though. Does it still hold that Sean Payton was a better quarterback than Tony Eason?
Well, Sean Payton was at Eastern Illinois.
But I thought you said Sean Payton was the best quarterback you faced.
He was.
So he was better than Tony Eason.
Well, Tony Eason was he was a very good quarterback too.
Just in case Tony's listening.
I don't want a Troy Aikman situation to come back up on this podcast.
Just in case you're listening, Tony, you're 1 and 1A. We'll let you decide how those guys are ranked. All right, so this is going to be a story worth watching. Man, it feels like Caleb has some leverage, and it feels like the team that has to end up trading these quarterbacks or not draft them at all end up being on the short end of the stick. But to your point, Arizona already has 2 first-round picks. And if we get to the situation where we got to figure out the Caleb thing, if Drake May balls out or the QB3, who we don't know who he is yet, balls out, they have some options. So we'll monitor that.